Hello, it is Zach Powers, the NASA scientist. And today is the big question we need to answer. Is there life on Mars? Does life really exist on Mars? Then, if it did exist on Mars, how and where did it come from? And how did life on Mars become the only thing on Mars that we need? Are we going to go to Mars in the future? Are we going to terraform Mars? Well, in today, so basically Mars is what we know as the red planet. And so let's talk about the atmosphere of Mars first. So the atmosphere of Mars contains many other materials. And the big question is, why is Mars' atmosphere red? What makes Mars' atmosphere so red? It's basically a chemical in the atmosphere is known as iron. Iron is in the Martian atmosphere, in which it makes the atmosphere red. There's iron and oxygen mixed together, which makes the Martian atmosphere red. And on the surface of Mars, we see that there are rocks on Mars. There are these structures on Mars that we are seeing. But back in the 1990s and the 1980s, the Mariner spacecraft flew by Mars, took some pictures, and what is its surface? And what is life on that planet supposed to be like? What's it like on Mars? Will we ever go to Mars? Well, the thing is, here on Earth, we have multiple life forms. Like, for example, trees. Trees are what we hear grow on Earth, because trees contain photosynthesis, light, and oxygen. Without oxygen, we won't be able to breathe on Earth. We would suffocate if we didn't have any oxygen. On Mars, there's no oxygen. If without a spacesuit, definitely freeze. But on Mars, if you have a spacesuit, then you are likely to feel Mars itself and the actual oxygen that is up there on Mars. And there is dust storms on Mars, in which they're not too bad. But when Mariner flew past Mars, but this time around in the 1980s, it never flew past Mars. All it does, it just stays there at the planet Mars until it records everything on Mars and what is happening on the Martian surface. And it saw something poking up through the dust. And we don't know really what they were at first, because the dust storm was like huge. And I think it couldn't be a bad one, but this time around, the sandstorm on Mars was a super duper bad one. It like covered the whole entire planet. And it saw something that was poking up through the dust, in which we don't know. And the imaging team of that group leader is named Brad Smith. And he is the one that has been saying that we don't know what these structures were poking up through the dust were. And so we took a closer look at pictures of what was poking up through the dust. And these peaks on Mars were known as volcanoes. Yes, volcanoes poking up through the dust. There were little ones on Mars, and then there's the biggest volcano ever on Mars, which is christened Olympus Mons, which is bigger than Mount Everest. Mars is no other moon. It is a place full of life, and what we need to know at first. So we do know that life travels. And the audience is like, what do you mean life travels? Good question. So on the planet Earth, we have rocks. Look at these rocks. Look at these rocks. If I were to break open these rocks here, I would find some spots on inside the rocks. Now, there's brown rocks in which the like thousands of billions years older on the planet Earth. In these rocks, which have these microorganisms in them, and there are other rocks, as known as green rocks, in which they have these green bacteria in them. So we do know that life travels. We do know that. And so, did life die on Mars? Well, yes, because Mars used to have life long ago. And then something happened to that life. It died out. And so this Mariner space probe is supposed to be detecting these Martian earthquakes, but more than spectacular than we thought. So, does Mars have life? Yes. It used to have life, and then it doesn't have life anymore. But what are we going to do about that? Well, in the future, we are going to colonize Mars, in which send groups of humans to Mars in the very, very far future. Because when the Earth dies out in the very far future, becoming uninhabitable, we've got to find another place to live. Because in 5 billion years lifetime, the sun, will engulf Mercury and Venus. And won't get to the Earth, but we will be fried for sure. Got to find another place to live, like Mars. And if we go to Mars, all of these Mariner space probes go to Mars, and they're still trying to figure out to whether life still exists on Mars. And does it still exist? Yes. And the frozen polar ice caps on Mars. There's one north up top. There's these frozen ice caps, which is on the north up top, and the south at the bottom of the planet. And in the middle of the planet is the biggest canyon, bigger than the Grand Canyon here on Earth. And that canyon on Mars is known as Valles Marineris. Valles Marineris is the biggest canyon on Mars, in which basically is bigger than a Grand Canyon here on Earth. And Mars, if we were to send a space probe that does ice fishing, we would send a probe or something like the Curious Martian rover, Mars rover, to Mars, break open the frozen ice thing up top, and find like water inside the frozen polar ice caps. And what that water is going to do is cover the whole entire planet, and some of the continents on Mars might drift apart like this. And we will build huge domes on Mars And we would also build like huge domes on Mars. We would also build like cities on Mars. If we were to support life on Mars, gotta build this big, giant, massive dome that has a city in it, food, water, and all the ingredients we have in life here on Earth. Here on Earth. Have you seen the movie called The Martian? If you have, leave your answers down in the comment section below. That movie, if you have not seen it before, I'm not going to spoil it for you, but if you already have, then basically, the movie, The Martian, is about a group of people as astronauts going to Mars, growing food and water on Mars, and staying there for like a whole year and then coming back. Because as when you get to Mars, you age slowly on Mars. And since I'm 22 years old, if I was on Mars right now, if I'm 22 years old, in a year or a few years, if I'm 22 years old right now, and if I was on Mars, I'll be there only for like 3 to 5 years. And right now, in 5 years from now, I'll be 27 years old, in which I'll be an old man. I'm pretty young. And so, and so on Earth, we have everything that we need. And then there's these bugs. And so there's these satellites that are like, there's no response at all. And then it is like sending life to Mars and the life on Earth. So life on Mars is insane, and we are going to be able to colonize Mars in the future. So life is possible on Mars. It used to happen, and then it's going to happen again. So if you enjoyed this video, credits, comments, and the outro, Power Hour Squad, Kingdom Volume Discord, we'll see you later. This is Pieces Out. I'm off. That, then, Powers and That's a Scientist is off. Peace.